Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to the US and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a couple of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a few different styles, and if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they are probably just very solid all round, albeit I haven't had too many of their beers actually. But the one we're going to have a look at today is a style that I very much enjoy. You could probably argue that it's a kind of cross between two different styles if you really wanted to, but both of those styles I do really enjoy. And it is actually one of their more famous releases from what I understand. And it's one that I've wanted to try for a number of years, but it's only now that I've finally managed to get a hold of a bottle of this one. I've had so many requests to review this beer on the channel over the years, and finally we're going to tick that box. So yeah, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head down to Delaware, the first American state, and a bit to the south of me here in New Jersey at the moment. And we're going to have a look then at another beer from Dogfish Head Craft Brewery. So this particular beer is called 120 Minute IPA. There is no ABV stated on the bottle here, but apparently this is custom with this beer, and it does say on Untappd that this thing can be about, it can be about 18% or something like this, but they're calling it on the bottle an Imperial IPA. I have heard people telling me that this one is more like a kind of American barley wine as well. But yeah, as you know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I love my kind of big boozy West Coast IPAs, and I also love a good American barley wine as well. So I think regardless of what it's going to be, I am probably going to enjoy this one. So that's always a good thing. But yeah, the famous 120 Minute IPA from Dogfish Head Craft Brewery in Delaware here in the US. Finally, we've managed to get a hold of a bottle of this one. But yeah, we'll crack on then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. As always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Dogfish Head Craft Brewery before, and we will add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist along with a number of other things, and we are adding to that quite regularly at the moment. And do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some really interesting beers up on the channel these days. But yeah, we'll crack on then and we'll have a little look at my notes for Dogfish Head. So, Dogfish Head Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are from Delaware, and the company was founded back in 1995 by Sam Calione along with his wife Mariah, I think you would pronounce it, and he opened the Dogfish Head Brewing and Eats in Rehoboth Beach in Delaware. But he started brewing in his dorm room in university with some friends, and from then on he was hooked on the idea of brewing as his profession. But originally they brewed on a very small system, which was essentially 3 kegs with propane burners underneath with an output of about 12 barrels. But this meant that they could experiment hugely with their recipes, and they also became very well known in those early days for their food cooked on a wood-burning grill. But they very quickly found themselves being unable to meet the demand for their beer, so they first increased their capacity 30-fold before eventually moving to a new facility in Milton, Delaware, which has a 100,000 square foot floor space, and it was a converted cannery. But at the same time they built a distillery to make rum, gin and vodka on the second floor of the Rehoboth Beach brew pub. But today they've got 3 brew houses. They've got the one in Rehoboth, one in Lewis and also the one in Milton, and in total they can produce around 175,000 US barrels of beer per year, which translates to 205,000 hectolitres of beer per year if you want to use the proper metric system. But they've also got another distillery which operates 50 stills, so again a very impressive operation, and these days they're operating their original brewery and eats and the newer Chesapeake and Maine restaurants in Rehoboth, Delaware, and also 3 alehouses in Fairfax and Falls Church, Virginia, and also one in Gaithersburg in Maryland, and they've got the Dogfish Inn Hotel as well. So they've increased quite dramatically in terms of their capacity and size over the years, but in 2019 they merged with Boston Beer Company in a $300 million deal. So Sam and his wife Mariah remain in charge of the Dogfish Head brand, but they are also a big stakeholder in Boston Beer Company and Sam Adams and things like this. But as of September 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 1,200, my apologies, different beers according to Untappd. So they have been very prolific over the years. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Dogfish Head Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, we will crack on then and have a little look at this beer itself. So as you may be aware, if you've followed Dogfish Head over the years, they have a few different beers in this series. They've got the 60-minute IPA, the 90-minute IPA, and then the 120-minute IPA. The 60 and 90 are actually quite easy to get a hold of. You can get those in these big sort of double can, big tall boy cans, as they would be called over here. Those are about 600 odd millilitres, 19 ounces or something like that. But there you can see the Dogfish Head bottle cap on this one, which looks very, very nice. And yeah, you can see this one, I think, is 375 millilitres. I think this, it doesn't say how many, it's 12 fluid ounces, so yeah, I think that's kind of 375-ish millilitres if you translate it. But yeah, this one comes in at, I think, about 18% ABV, something like that. It didn't say on the Untappd page what hops and things like that they used in it, or yeah, it didn't even. I don't think it even said on the website either when I had a little look, because I was quite curious to see what the recipe of this one is. So yeah, if you go on to the Untappd page, which I have open just now, it just says it clocks in at between 15 and 20% ABV. It just says American hops. It doesn't tell you what varieties or anything like that actually. So yeah, but very highly rated, 4.2. But let's close that off and we'll actually focus on the beer itself. So yeah, the 120-minute IPA. Let's see what this beer is going to have in store for us. I'm really curious about this. So as you can see, nice little bit of smoke on the opening there. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. I should also point out as well that this one, it says on the side of the bottle that this one was bottled on the yeah, it was bottled, that's going to be the 7th of March 2020. So I'm drinking this one when it's about 3.5 years old actually. That's kind of interesting. So yeah, they say you can drink this one fresh or you can drink it old. Maybe we'll need to experiment with these in the future if I ever move to the US. But yeah, anyway, you can see that this beer has poured really nicely. It very much looks like a very deep it looks like a very deep kind of deep, yeah, very deep amber, sort of coppery colour, this one. You can see it's got very little head to it, which you'd expect of a beer that is such high ABV. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well. When it comes to barley wines, or West Coast IPAs, as this one would be as well, the barrel can affect the colour of your beer, but not madly much, if that makes sense. But this one definitely looks like a very rich coloured West Coast double IPA. You can see that lovely, very dark amber note there. There are a few little bits of sediment particle floating around in this one. It has been in the fridge for a couple of weeks, and it was obviously on the shelf at the shop where I bought it for a good wee while. But it was kept at a good temperature actually. It wasn't overly warm or anything like that. But you can see the beer has a bit of a natural haze to it. And it is, they do say that as well, that it's unfiltered and things like this, which is obviously good. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there, or going up toward the surface of the liquid, I should say. The beer doesn't really have a head, but that looks pretty nice. Yeah, I don't think we need to say too much more about the appearance of this one. It kind of is pretty much as you would expect from an Imperial West Coast IPA, as this one would have been from that time, or an American barley wine. Yeah, looks good. So let's take a wee look at the aroma and just see what we get out of this one then. I'm very curious about this beer. Yeah, aroma-wise, this beer is pretty damn nice, I have to say. Yeah, it's kind of everything you'd expect, to be honest. This is proper old school. I love coming back to beers like this that have been around for a long time and just, you know, enjoying the aroma of them and tasting them and stuff like this. It's always great. I do miss my old school West Coast IPAs, and this one unquestionably is a West Coast IPA. But you can smell that it's been sat for it. You can smell on the age of this thing, it has got that sort of kind of bready, woody sort of thing that comes out when you age a barley wine for a number of years. But yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma a little more in depth and see what we think. So the backbone of this beer, you absolutely have that little bit of you absolutely have a little bit of that kind of woody, fresh, white bready bread crust in there. Yeah, you've got that little bit of fresh, white bready bread crust in there, and the way that that goes together is it's really quite nice. Yeah, so you get on the backbone, you have this little bit of an almost like woody type character in the base. Then you've got that fresh white bready bread crust, and then above that you absolutely get this kind of I would say, yeah, you absolutely get this big, thick, kind of brown bready type character. Yeah, thick, kind of sweet brown bready character in there. It's got a fresh white bready note to it as well, and the bready character is quite sweet. I've said this about American grains many a time before. I think generally speaking the American palate is sweeter than the European palate, but the American grains, the American malts and things like that are just a little bit sweeter and smoother than their European counterparts, to be honest with you. There's a definite difference between like American Turo and German crystal malt, for example. But yeah, above all of the bready character, you start to get the brown sugars. And the brown sugars are really interesting in this one because you get a little bit of like a toasty, sweet caramel out of this one. But you also get that bigger, more oily, caramelly character coming out of the beer too, which I think is great. You also get a little bit of leatheriness, and when you get leathery brown sugars in a barley wine, or an Imperial Stout for that matter as well, usually that is an indicator of a longer wort boil, and you can definitely smell that in here. So you've got the toasty brown sugar, the leathery brown sugars. There's almost a little bit of like a kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotch, or vanilla fudge type note coming out of this one as well, which is really interesting. And you do get that straight up sweet caramel in the middle of the nose. You can smell that this beer is just covering up a whole load of booze, which is kind of what you'd expect from a big West Coast IPA or a barley wine, whichever category you want to put this beer into. So this one probably would have to be like a triple, more of a triple or a quadruple West Coast IPA, you could argue. And just on a bit of a technical side, from what I understand, the relationship between the West Coast, between an IPA and a double IPA, or whatever you want to call it, and a barley wine, you know, paleo IPA, barley wine, these styles are all related to each other through their malt to hop ratios, so they each have a different ratio, if that makes sense. So the technical difference between, say, a triple IPA and a barley wine would be that the triple IPA uses the double IPA malt to hop ratio, but they just put more malt in it, and yeah, they just basically put more malt in it and make the alcohol content higher. So yeah, that's your triple IPA. But I could well be wrong on that. I need to maybe read into the technicalities a little bit more, but that was my understanding of it at least. But I think we've covered the malty side of this beer now in terms of its aroma. So yeah, the only other thing I would add is that you get a bit more nuttiness out of this beer the further into the nose that you go. But let's look at the hoppy side of things then. And obviously with this beer being, you know, what is it, 3.5 years old now, a bit of the hoppy character will have dropped out of it, but still, you get quite a lot of it coming out of the beer. You've got a lovely little touch of earthiness coming out of this one, which is great. So you've got that little bit of kind of smooth, earthy character in the back of the nose. You get a little bit of herbal character, but there are big, floral aromatic components coming out of this one too, which are great. So lovely big kind of floral aromaticity in there. Nice big kind of zesty, grassy character as well, which I think is great. And yeah, the way all of that just kind of pieces together is pretty awesome, I have to say. Yeah, I think the green component, you can smell that it's not as pungent as it would have been when the beer was fresh. It would have been really interesting to try one of these things fresh or on tap. So yeah, I do need to go down to Dogfish Head and see their original place at some point and make a wee out and about video. But that's something for a future trip, I will say that. But yeah, the aroma on the green side of things is really nice. On the fruity side of things, it's very interesting as well. I mean, you can smell, I think this is like old school sea hops that's been used in here. My English grammar is terrible these days. That's what's going through my head right at the moment. But yeah, with this one, you do absolutely get, there's a whole mix of things going on. You've got this lovely, you've got a lovely kind of there's a little touch of grapefruit coming out of the beer. You do get a lovely kind of oily, peachy note to it, big sort of passion fruity note, big mango and things like that, but they're very, very oily. But yeah, you get dry pear, apricot, things like that, and you've also got a wee bit of, I think there's Centennial in this, I think Cascade and Chinook definitely in this one, which will give you the bit of grapefruit and the more oily kind of, there's like a datey kind of figgy note to this one as well, which you can smell. So I think there's Cascade and Chinook in this one definitely, and I think that I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of Citra and Centennial as well. I really think this is just from the aroma, I think this is classic sea hopped, because you do get a little bit of that lemony, limey character in the front of the nose, mostly lemon, which would be Centennial. But yeah, the aroma on this one is just absolutely beautiful. So as I always say, take a bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we taste this one and see what it's all about. This review has been a long time coming. But yeah, this one is the 120-minute IPA, an Imperial IPA, somewhere between 15 and 20% ABV, probably more like a barley wine. Very famous beer from Dogfish Head Craft Brewery in Milton, down in Delaware. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers. That is basically a big, boozy, brown sugary bomb. Yeah. It's pretty damn good, actually. It'd be interesting to know what the optimum aging time for a beer like this actually is, because I found with American barley wines, if you let them go over, 3 or 4 years, they give you this really, you get a lot of this really dry, woody sort of thing, and the hops become like quite dry and spicy. So I think there is, maybe about 3 or 4 years of aging a barley wine is about prime. This one, I think, is in fairly good condition, because you can feel it starting to do that more kind of dry, woody, spicy, hoppy sort of thing. But it's still got the kind of big oily fruitiness from the hops, the sweetness and all these kind of things. So, yeah, I think we're getting this one in fairly good condition, but I would love to try it fresh and see what it's like there as well, when it's still got all the big oily sweetness and the big hoppy character as well. But as it stands, it is pretty damn nice, and you can feel this is just a booze bomb. So, yeah, this is great. I will say, it covers its alcohol very well. This is, I'll say that now and it will hit me in a few minutes, just how boozy this one is. I actually thought this beer was going to be about, 12% or something like that, because, I think the 60-minute IPA, if I remember correctly, 6, the 90 minutes 9, so I thought this was going to be about 12% ABV. It doesn't, I have to admit, it doesn't feel as if it's 18%, but quite a few of the American beers are good at covering their booze, and that's something that brewers have been getting better and better at over the years. We have to keep that in mind. But if we consider this beer as like a big West Coast IPA or an American barley wine, it really does the job and fits the category quite well. We can absolutely say that about it for sure. So yeah, where do we start with this one then? Middle third of the palate. So, the backbone of the beer, you have this lovely, very smooth, almost like woody character in the backbone there, and that goes together really nicely. So yeah, lovely kind of woody backbone in there. On top of that, you get this little bit of like a fresh, brown bready bread crust sitting on top of the beer, or sitting on top of the wood. So yeah, you've got that woody base, the fresh brown bready bread crust in there. A little bit further forward on that middle third of the palate, you start to get the kind of nutty characters coming out of the beer, which I think are very nice as well. So yeah, lovely little bit of, yeah, I would say, on top of that kind of bread crusty character, you get this lovely, quite dense, but still quite smooth, kind of wholemeal, sweet brown bready character coming out of this one. And then above that, you get the same, but a white bready layer, and both of those bready characters are pretty sweet, I would say. Yeah, the brown, and within the bready characters, yeah, you start to get this little bit of a nutty character that just lingers into the aftertaste as well. The bready notes in this are really nice, but of course, the bready character gets dominated by the kind of brown sugary notes in this beer, which is what you'd expect when you consider what it is. So above the bready character, you get a little bit of this kind of toasty, brown sugary sort of thing, which I think is great. So yeah, there's a little bit of a kind of toasty, brown sugary character in there. Then you've got this big circle in the middle of your palate, which is like an oily, you've got this big smooth kind of oily and dry leathery brown sugar in there, which, as I say, is usually an indicator of a longer wort boil. But if we talk about 120 minutes in the context of imperial stouts or barley wines, 120 minutes really isn't a lot. 6 hours I think is quite common for a barley wine or an imperial stout. Some breweries I know leave the things going overnight to let the mash, just to let the wort boil away. So yeah, you do get a little bit of that leathery character out of this one, but nowhere near what you might get from some other beers. That's definitely fair to say. But yeah, so yeah, a little touch of a kind of leathery brown sugar in there, toasty brown sugar as well. Above that, you've got this nice big kind of oily, you've got this nice big kind of dry, sweet character coming out of this one. It's like a Werther's Original butter candy butterscotch, and you've got the sweet caramel right in the middle of your palate. So yeah, lovely big kind of sweet caramel note in the dead centre of your tongue, and of course that is the concentration of the alcohol in this beer. Yeah, it's an absolute monster, this one, I have to say that. I can feel the booze down here at this point, but yeah, I think it's absolutely great. Gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, on the fruity side of things, or on the middle third of the palate, I think we've covered everything we really need to. Just there's a lot of layers of brown sugar in there, kind of woodiness, nuttiness that kind of comes out into the aftertaste. I think that's it. So yeah, that's middle third of the palate done. Let's go to the back third of the palate, and remember that generally speaking, with your palate, sweeter flavours will come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours will come out further back, and between the middle and the back third of your palate, you're going to get similar flavours. but just at different intensities. So that border region between middle and back third of your palate, you can feel there's a nice little bit of brown bread in the base and white bread on top. And then, yeah, the base of that back third of the palate, you can feel the woody character, that sort of woody character I was talking about that's there, is there, but it's just slightly drier. Then above that, you get the bread crust, which again feels like it's a little bit drier. I should point out as well, when I talk about woody dryness in this beer, obviously the thing isn't barrel aged, but it does have, like if you use wood chips, like oak chips and things like that in beers, this beer does taste like a little bit of that has been done, but I know it hasn't. I will say that straight away. It does just have this little bit of woody dryness underneath. But yeah, you've got the bread crust, which feels a bit drier. Then you've got the brown bready layer, which feels a little bit taller and more airy, kind of lighter. Then you've got the white bready layer that sits above that, which again is lighter and more airy. And you can feel some of the more toasty, dry aspects of the brown sugar just creeping over the top of that back third of your palate. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. On top of everything else, on top of everything else, you have this, on top of everything else, you've got the kind of, you've got the yeasty character coming out of this beer, which I think is really interesting. So on the yeasty side of things, you've got this big, doughy, brown bready kind of yeasty character in there. And then it's almost wrapped in this little bit of a kind of bread crusty, woody character. So yeah, you've got that big, doughy, dense brown bready yeast wrapped in this sort of doughy character. Got a little bit of a kind of bread crusty note around it, a little bit of woodiness and things like that. But yeah, that sits above everything else on the on the back third of the palate. So yeah, you can see, back third of the palate, the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that sense is really nice. So, yeah, I think the way this goes together, the malty side of things for me is just right up my street. It's great. So yeah, let's go on to the hoppy side of things then. Back corners of the palate. You've got a nice little bit of, you do get that nice little bit of earthiness in the back corners of the palate there. As you move further forward, it gives you a little touch of a kind of herbal character. And as you push further forward, it gets more and more kind of floral and aromatic. It's almost a little touch spicy, but yeah, there's a wee touch of like pine resin in there. But obviously, the hoppy character has dropped out of this beer over the kind of years and things that it's been sitting there. So that is definitely worth bearing in mind there. But round the front curve of the tongue, the beer's definitely lighter and more grassy. Little touch of zestiness is still there. But yeah, if you drank this beer fresh, the hoppy character would be quite different to what you would get if you. It is quite different now compared to what you would get if it was fresh. Let's just say that. But let's have a wee look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of the beer, just to round off the flavour section. So, yeah, in terms of the front third of your palate then, that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there, wee bit of kind of brown bread underneath, white bread on top. Then the base of that front third of your palate is more along the lines, you've got a little bit of that, you do have a wee bit of this kind of woody character underneath the brown bread bread crust, then the brown bread, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, the way all of that goes together, I think, is really quite interesting. As I say, it gets a big thumbs up from me in that particular regard. So the fruity side of the beer, let's have a look at that then. Back of that front third of your palate. the back of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of grapefruit in there. You get that stronger grapefruit. And as you move further forward, yeah, so you get that stronger grapefruit in there. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of a kind of peachy note out of it. There's a little bit of that sharper peach, which makes me think, yeah, there's a bit of citra in here. So definitely a bit of the oily kind of passion fruit and mango. And underneath, in the base, yeah, you get a little bit of that drier apricot and so on. And as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's actually interesting because it feels like it has a wee bit of orangey character, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of Amarillo in here, just with the way the zesty orange is. Amarillo would not surprise me in this beer. And then you also have, yeah, so on top of that, on top of the Amarillo, I think you've also got a wee bit of a lemony, limey, zesty character just behind the front tip of the tongue, which could be a combination of Citra and I think Centennial as well. So if I was guessing with this beer, I think there's Cascade, I think Citra, Chinook, and yeah, probably Centennial, and maybe a wee bit of Amarillo as well. I think those are probably the hops that have been used in this one. It is very, yeah, it is very kind of old school, this one, but that's what you want. I miss the beers that were kind of like this. The big oily sort of West Coast IPAs like this are great. Yeah, this is awesome, I have to say that. Very, very interesting beer, this one, and properly nostalgic for me. I've missed the stuff that's like this. But yeah, this thing is a monster. I can feel the booze coming out of it later. I'm not sure that it's 120. I'm not sure that it's like 18%, as it said on Untappd. They put 18%, but in the blurb it said, you know, between 15 and 20% ABV. I'm not sure it's quite that. It might hit me a little bit later on. I can feel some boozy warmth down here. So I think it could be, you know, sort of 13, 14% ABV, but 18 or so, not 100% sure about that. But still, whatever ABV it is quite nice. And it does cover its alcohol fairly well, I would say. Yeah, in terms, I think that's everything we need to say in terms of the flavour of this beer. So let's round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So, mouthfeel-wise, I would say, for me, this beer, it's bottom end of full bodied for me. Carbonation is quite smooth. It's got a good little bit of like oily slickness to it, which I think is kind of interesting. Kind of typical as to what you would expect of a West Coast IPA, that's for sure. But yeah, in terms of IBU and things like that, with this one, it's I think it probably would, when it was fresh, it would have been like, you know, 80, 90 IBUs. It would have been way up there at the top of the scale. As it stands, I think it's maybe about like 70-ish, 60, 70-ish, potentially a wee bit more. And obviously, as you say, the longer you age this thing, the more the hoppy character is going to drop out of it. It's your alpha acids that determine how bitter the beer is going to be, and then it's the alpha to beta acid ratio that determines how long that bitterness is going to last. But yeah, this one feels as if it's about 60 or 70-ish IBUs at this particular point in time when the beer's 3.5 years old. But yeah, the malt base, say, it's got a bit of dryness underneath, a bit of kind of grainy character from the bread crust, smooth and sweet bread, and big sweet brown sugars on top, and then you've got this lovely oily fruity character which lingers there into the aftertaste as well. So yeah, I like this one. The way that this goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this review. This has been really interesting to try, and it's another one of these kind of landmark beers ticked off my list. So I'm glad that I managed to get a hold of a bottle of this while I was over here in the US this time. But yeah, this was the 120-minute IPA, coming in at somewhere between, you know, I think about 12 to 18% ABV, something like that. An Imperial IPA, very close to a barley wine, to be honest with you, from Dogfish Brewery in Milton, down in Delaware. A lot of people have been requesting this review for years. Finally, you've got it. But yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Dogfish Head as well. and we will see about returning to these guys fairly soon. I do have an Imperial Stout to review from these guys as well, which I'll see about filming before I leave. But yeah, definitely cool. Have a look at this one at least, and I will catch you guys in another review. So until the next time, Slanjit Skull, cheers, check out my social media, check out Dogfish Head's social media, and I'll see you guys on another review very, very soon. Ciao just now.